What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we are going to be doing some speculations and assumptions as to what could possibly be coming in Season 6 of Deep Rock Galactic. Now, I know it's probably a little bit too early to be doing stuff like this, as Season 5 is still not too old, and we still have a lot more time before Season 6 is slated to come out. But since we have a lot of time between this and Season 6, as well as Rogue Core, I thought it would be kind of fun to sort of brainstorm and think about the kind of things that we might be seeing when Season 6 does come out. There have been a lot of things that have come out within all of the seasons of Deep Rock Galactic, so Season 6 could potentially bring a multitude of different things that we might have seen before, or some new things that we maybe haven't seen. It's really completely up to the devs at this point, and all we can really do is assume, but I still thought it would be fun to do a little bit of speculation. So without further ado, let's talk. Firstly, I think obviously one of the biggest things regarding what could possibly be with Season 6 is the theme. And I think that more likely than not, it is going to stick with the same theme that we have with Season 5, which is drilling deeper into Hoxus, learning more about what's happening deeper down, closer to the core, and potentially even more tie-ins with Rogue Core that we might see later on down the line. And the reason why I feel this way is because we can see a bit of a trend happening with the previous seasons that we've had before. Seasons 1 and 2 were both rival themed. They basically follow the story of the rival company that was also trying to mine Hoxus that we basically had to stop. Whereas seasons 3 and 4 were focused on rockpox. They focused on rockpox infecting Hoxus and us trying to cleanse it or get rid of it or just keep it under control. And both of them had aspects regarding each of their particular themes overall. And with Season 5, we got the introduction to, I guess we could call this the drilling deeper saga, if you wanted to call it that, because we're basically going deeper into the planet, getting more experience and more exposure to the core stone type stuff. So I think it stands to reason that Season 6 is going to have to do with a lot of the same different factors and set pieces that Season 5 has given us. I think we're going to see more things from the core stone. I think we're going to see more things akin to the cave crawlers. To a little bit of a degree, I know they're probably going to be saving the bulk of that particular enemy family and dynamic for Rogue Core, which is completely understandable. But I still think we're going to get a couple more little hints or tweaks as to those particular types of enemies, or just the overall core stone theme. Because keep in mind, once Season 6 comes out, I believe Rogue Core is going to be released. So we will already kind of know what's going on with Rogue Core, so they won't have to be super coy about it anymore. But now they might be able to do just full-blown collaborations and crossovers between the two games, which I think would be really interesting. Now, in terms of what actually they could add in terms of real gameplay mechanics or just additions to the game, again, there's a really big list of things that they could add and things that they have added in previous seasons that could come back. But I think probably one of the biggest and most logical, and at least in my opinion, most wanted things to come out would probably be a new biome. A new biome would make a lot of sense since we are continuously drilling deeper into Hoxus, and we can finally see some new locales, can finally see some new locations. So I think the idea of implementing a new biome just makes a lot of sense, at least in my opinion. And I think it would also be pretty good for the game because new locales and new biomes and new locations that we explore have not been something that have been implemented for a very long time. I can't even remember the last time we got a new biome added into the game. And this could just open up so many things for the dev to give us more creative outlooks on the type of environments that we're in, give us new environmental hazards, new flora, just new resources potentially. I think that there could be a lot of things that they could do with this that would help further improve the gameplay even more than it already is, because now we have new locations, new minerals, probably if they wanted to add new minerals, or they could just do a combination that doesn't already exist, which I think there's a couple of combinations of minerals that aren't currently in the game yet, but I could be wrong. And just give us more variety in the places that we go to, which can honestly add a lot of replay value, even if it's something as small as that. And this biome could be incredibly unique compared to the other ones that we have seen before. Like, imagine an entire biome themed off of the design of the core stone, and there could just be these rifts that just randomly open up because the area is kind of unstable, but these rifts you might actually be able to use and pop in one side and then come out in another spot of the caves, kind of similar to something out of Portal. I think that would be really cool. And that might be a little bit too ambitious or something a little bit too ridiculous for a biome, but I still think the idea of a new location would be something that would be really cool to be added in. And I think something else that could go along with that could be even more new enemies. As I said before, some new enemies involved with the family of core stone crawlers could be interesting, but again, it would be kind of understandable if they didn't want to give us all of that because they kind of want to save that for Rogue Core. But again, if this season is going to be coming out by the time Rogue Core is released, I feel like adding at least maybe one new enemy type that is also in that same family of enemies wouldn't necessarily be a big deal. And Season 5's enemies, for the most part, were pretty well executed, especially a lot better than Season 4's enemies, at least on release. And even with Season 4's enemies, the fact that they were a little bit shaky on release, now they are in a much better position. So I think that new enemies being added into the game are A, never a bad idea, and B, something I think that the devs could really do very well, especially if we're branching out into an entirely new family of enemies that we have been before. Personally, I would really like to see the addition of the Rammer from the board game. I know that that's sort of a unique enemy that exists only in the board game, that I believe the devs at one point said that that was because Mood just kind of took a little bit of liberty with making it, and it wasn't something that they initially intended on adding in. But I still think it would be a really cool idea to add that into the game. I think that it has a very unique kind of design. Obviously, the front plate that it has would probably be unbreakable armor similar to the Oppressors. But then I also think of it more kind of like the Charger from Left 4 Dead, where it just sort of runs into you and isolates you and immobilizes you for a little bit. But it might do something where it just kind of like knocks you back, or it might like slow you down or something, or kind of like a weird different version of the Stingtail maybe, where it kind of isolates you and like shoves you away from the teammates. I think that'd be a really cool idea. But again, it might not be something they do, but I do still think new enemies being added in with Season 6 would be really cool. And then another one, which I don't think anybody's going to be really surprised if this is the case, but secondary weapon overclocks, I think, are very likely and probably almost guaranteed, because we got new primary overclocks with the addition of Season 5, and they were all really good for the most part. They were all pretty powerful and pretty game-breaking in most cases, except for burst fire. And I think that secondary overclocks are probably just more or less going to be a thing that gets added in with Season 6, because it just kind of makes the most sense that we got overclocks for the primaries, and now we're going to be getting some for the secondaries. As for what they could be, it could really be anything, and the devs have shown that they can get really creative when it comes to making new overclocks. To give a few examples of things that I think would be really cool is one for maybe the Engineer's Grenade Launcher, where instead of it exploding, it just releases like a cloud of gas that has no explosive power, but instead just infects the enemies, kind of like the neurotoxin shells from the Gunner's Thunderhead, or just basically make it a more powerful tuned version of the Driller's neurotoxin grenades, I think would be kind of a cool thing. Or maybe some sort of like shock grenade wouldn't be that bad either. For the Gunner, you could do something like just straight up make his burst pistol full auto, just to give us a straight up SMG as a secondary, which I think would be really cool. The Scout's boomstick could have something like where it has slug rounds and it's a lot more accurate, and you could use a lot more range, but maybe the recoil is ridiculous. And the Driller, I would like to see maybe something out of the EPC that just turns it into much more of a focused and powerful damage dealing tool. Maybe something where you can just honestly hold the charge as long as you can, and the explosive radius just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But if you hold it for too long, you're basically going to consume all of your battery with one shot, which could be very interesting. Just some sort of stuff like that I think would be really cool. And then to mix things up a little bit, something that I feel like would be really interesting for Deep Rock that might be a little bit outside of the realm of possibility, but I still think would be really cool, would be kind of like mission variations, or mission variants, I guess is the best way to describe it, where basically you have missions that start off as one thing, but then might become something completely different as you get farther along. I guess the best way to describe it is, if anybody's ever played Warframe, you know that when you go into a particular mission, which like Deep Rock, each mission has its own specific type of objective, whether it be defense or whatever the case may be. And some of the mission types, when you're in them about like halfway through, or at some cases, sometimes your mission objective might just change. There might just be something else that happens to where, you know, you're in a mission where you have to release a hostage or a captive and get them out of there, but then something happens, and then all of a sudden your objective is just to eliminate everybody in the facility, which I think is a really cool idea that Deep Rock might be able to incorporate, and it kind of does already a little bit. The only real example of this happening is that dreadnoughts have a very rare chance to spawn during your missions in place of a swarm, and that kind of feels sort of like what I'm talking about, whereas the mission type that you're on, whatever it is, becomes an elimination mission, at least for a little while, until you get rid of it, and then it goes back to its normal mission type. And I think something like that would be really, really good to expand upon in Deep Rock. I'm thinking maybe something like a dynamic mission system, where your objectives changed based on either how you're doing or certain other parameters or just certain things that are happening. Like imagine you're going through a mining expedition, right? You're just going through the caves, collecting the morkite, and then you just stumble across a crashed and abandoned drop pod straight out of a salvage operation. And that would be really interesting if you had the ability to potentially do that as well. You might not necessarily have to, but if you do, you will get a crap ton more reward. It's basically like a major secondary objective, or almost like you're doing a deep dive, but just in a normal mission. I think that would be really cool. Maybe not necessarily like that, but in some sort of way where missions feel a little bit more dynamic and a little bit less scripted, I guess, in the sense. Which, not to say that the missions are scripted in any way, shape, or form, because a lot of things can happen, but in a sense to where when you go into, say, an escort duty mission, you don't 100% know exactly what you're going to go through, because things might change or something else might happen that might completely change the way that your mission goes. And sticking on the vein of deep dives, I think something that would be really, really cool for like the end game, or for just people who just really like this kind of stuff, is to just have an endless deep dive mode. Something where you literally just keep going down as far as you possibly can until you cannot anymore. Or if you wanted to do it in a bit of a more lenient sort of way, I guess, and again, kind of drawing from Warframe again, I don't know why I keep referencing that in this particular video, but basically the way that they do their survival missions is basically you survive 5 rounds, and then you have the option to extract or to continue on, in which case you have to survive another 5 rounds before you have the option to extract again. You can do something similar to that in Deep Rock's deep dives, where basically you go through 3 missions, and then you have the choice to either go back to the space rig or continue again, where in which you have to go through another 3 missions before you have the option to extract again. And you can maybe change it up to where you actually do get planetary resources doing this, or other sort of things can happen. Just a way to give people who really do want to push themselves a way to just have a sort of like an endless sort of survival game mode, I think would go a long way in giving a lot of replayability, because then that also opens the door up for challenge runs and things of that nature. And I just think that something like that, even outside of just deep dives, I think just an endless mode in Deep Rock is something that could very much be well received by the fan base. And yes, I know technically you can just do an endless mode if you just go onto a point extraction and just never leave. I get that, but eventually you will run out of resources and you will perish. So I don't know if I would necessarily consider that, but I mean something more in the official case as well. And then when it comes to smaller stuff, I mean, they've shown that they've been able to add smaller quality of life changes that we weren't even really expecting. So in that sense, there's literally an endless number of things that they could do. All in all, I really do think that Season 6 is primed for giving us a lot of interesting stuff. And while I don't necessarily know what it is, I do think that some of these things that I talked about in this video are more than likely going to show up, especially the secondary weapon overclocks, considering how it just makes so much sense. I would like to see more biomes, as I said before, and obviously more enemies, and I'm sure that Ghost Ship is cooking on something, but we just have to wait and see once Rogue Core comes out what Season 6 is going to have in store. But I also want to hear what you guys think and what your guys' speculations on Season 6 are going to be. Do you think there's going to be a lot of content like there was in Season 5, or do you think we're going to get something more like Season 3, where not a whole lot was added in? The devs are definitely cooking on something, so we just kind of have to be patient and wait and see. But in the meantime, let me know what you guys think. Anyway, I hope you guys found this video informative and entertaining. If you did, please be sure to give it a like, because it tells me what types of videos you guys want to see. And consider becoming a member today, as it really helps me out a lot. Rocket Stone Miners, I will see you in the next video.